Good afternoon. I'm Spot On Weather meteorologist Matthew Euler, and welcome to this special holiday video. We're just a couple days from Christmas 2021, and look at this wonderful picture here to start the video off on this special edition, showing a nice ornament there with some multicolored lights in the background. Just a really nice picture. Overall, I hope everyone out there is having a great holiday season with friends and family. We got a lot to talk about today in this special video, and this is not necessarily just solely a teleconnections discussion video. So let's get right into what we're going to dive into here today. Right, first I want to start off with a quick Christmas Eve forecast. The graphic on the left there is courtesy of Tropical Tidbits website. The graphic on the right is the GEFS, the GFS Ensemble Forecasting System 500 millibar geopotential height and anomaly forecast. Generally what we're showing you on the left is the type of weather we'd expect on Christmas Eve if you have travel plans. Anywhere east of the Rocky Mountains really is looking good, as high pressure, a 1023 millibar high pressure system is situated over northern Florida, and we're looking at very quiet conditions again, from the East Coast to the Rocky Mountains. Now, once you go back west of the Rocky Mountains for tomorrow, if you have travel plans, you could run into some weather delays, especially if you're flying towards Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego, up into the Pacific Northwest. The airports such as the Seattle and Portland airports could run into a few delays. But in general, if you're driving, it's looking really good for a large chunk of the country tomorrow on Christmas Eve. The graphic there on the right showing where the upper level ridges, the upper level troughs are located. Generally, we have a large, expansive upper level ridge that remains fairly stationary in the North Pacific, and it is ridging itself northward over the Aleutian Islands into parts of western Alaska into the Bering Sea. And then downstream of that ridge, we have a upper level trough, which is indicated by those purple and green shading colors. And then the orange shading on the graphic on the right indicates higher heights and general ridging. There's an upper level high there positioned over Mexico, and in general, east of the Mississippi River especially, we have some ridging. In addition, up over towards Greenland, there's a strong upper level ridge as well, which is resulting in a negative North Atlantic oscillation. But in general, Santa's trip tomorrow evening on Christmas Eve, he's going to need a heavier coat there over the western United States for sure, as that's where the trough will be located and the most unsettled weather and the coldest temperatures. Looking at the Christmas Day forecast, there is a little bit of a disturbance, an area of low pressure over northern Ohio. There will be some showers stretching from northern Indiana, lower Michigan, through northern Ohio, New York State, into Pennsylvania, New York City. We do have a little bit of a mix of snow on the northeastern boundary and the colder air. Generally expected light precip amounts over Vermont, New Hampshire, into parts of upstate New York. And then we do have a little bit of snow for Christmas Day across the Dakotas, as well as parts of the western United States. If your travels are further south, much drier conditions and fairly mild from Houston all the way over to Mobile, as well as Jacksonville up to Atlanta, looking mild and dry. The chart there on the right showing the upper level features once more at 500 millibars or 18,000 feet. We have an upper level ridge positioned over the North Pacific, still holding its position, very strong, with that downstream trough remaining over western Canada and the western United States. Very cold air is expected to move into the base of that trough, and I'll show you some of the extended ensemble models, and you'll really get a good idea of that colder air. Generally, again, ridging conditions for Christmas Day, stretching from Texas up to the mid-Atlantic states, so we'd expect dry and fairly mild conditions anywhere from Texas up through Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, into the mid-Atlantic, as well as up to Pennsylvania, Ohio, and those locations. And we have another upper level ridge. That upper level ridge is maintaining its position there west of Greenland. All right, so now let's move ahead a little bit as we perhaps you've got travel plans after Christmas Day to head to a different location across the United States. I'm going to cover the next 4 to 5 days beyond Christmas just to kind of give you an idea of what to expect for the weather. So overall, we're looking at unsettled conditions on the 26th of December. This would be Sunday, generally unsettled with a lot of cold air pouring in from Western Canada to the Western United States. So if you plan to go skiing, let's say up in higher elevations of Utah, as well as Idaho, the Sierra Nevada, on up into parts of the Pacific Northwest, things are looking really good if you like winter sports or any kind of winter recreational activities. Generally east of the Mississippi River, we do see a little bit of a cool down in temperatures behind a departing area of low pressure there off of Massachusetts. That'll switch the winds back around to the northwest with colder temperatures. Generally, the upper level chart on the right shows a repetitive situation with that upper level ridge remaining over the North Pacific, extending northward into the Bering Sea with a downstream trough into the Pacific Northwest, and then ridging over the eastern U.S., resulting in fairly mild conditions once more. Again, the upper level ridge remains west of Greenland, producing that negative North Atlantic oscillation. There is a deeper trough just to the southeast of Greenland, to the southeast of that pretty strong upper level ridge. So overall, the day after Christmas, there will be some areas where we'll see some precipitation, especially up towards New England and the western United States. Looking at Monday, the 27th of December, 2021, here's the forecast, generally showing an area of low pressure over southern Illinois. We do see some rain from Chicago down to Indianapolis, as well as down to Cincinnati, into parts of West Virginia. There's snow north of that, so if you're traveling up towards the upper Midwest, Minnesota, into Wisconsin, into lower Michigan, into parts of northern Ohio and northwestern Pennsylvania, there's a good chance you'll see some snow. In general, out towards the western United States, we continue to see unsettled conditions for Monday, the 27th of December, with snow eventually giving way to lower elevation coastal rain there along northern California down into the San Francisco Bay. Graphic on the right shows the upper air pattern. Again, the upper level ridge maintaining its position over the North Pacific with a downstream trough once more into the really the Pacific Northwest, the northwestern U.S., parts of Montana, Idaho, Washington, and Oregon, and then the upper level ridge over the northwest Atlantic, just to the west of Greenland. And notice the subtropical ridge. Let me break out my tool here so I can point that feature out to you. Let me go to this. Right, so you notice this feature down here off of southern Florida in the southeastern Gulf of Mexico. This is that upper level ridge, that subtropical high. And that's going to be a theme here in today's video. And I'll get more into that here in a moment. But it just shows ridging with this orange shading right in this location. Again, the coldest air in the trough are going to be located over the Pacific Northwest, where the purple shading is. Another deep trough that just kind of remains nearly stationary out over the northwestern Atlantic. And this is that huge upper level ridge that we keep talking about. 28 December 2021 forecast, this would be going into next Tuesday. Generally, we have some unsettled weather across the northern plains states, North Dakota, South Dakota, into parts of northeastern Wyoming and eastern Montana. We do have a little moisture working its way on shore over Oregon. And then we do have a little bit of rain, shower activity across Missouri into southern and central Illinois, stretching east across Kentucky. But in general, the subtropical high is located just to the east of Jacksonville by next Tuesday, the 28th of December. Here is the reflection of the upper level high, that subtropical ridge at 18,000 feet or 500 millibar level. Generally seeing these orange shading, indicative of mild and fairly dry conditions, continuing generally from parts of southern Illinois, working eastward towards the Virginia coast, down all the way to Florida. And the trough just continuously remains over the Pacific Northwest with the upper level ridge upstream of the trough there in the North Pacific Ocean. And the ridging does kind of pivot. The axis pivots a little bit points more towards Alaska, vice straight north towards the Bering Sea by this point. This is the strong upper level ridge over the northwest Atlantic into just west of Greenland that I've been mentioning. And here's a very deep trough over the northwest Atlantic. Turning now to the Wednesday, 29 December 2021 forecast. Actually, now we're going to, from this point forward, I just wanted to show you comparisons between the ensemble models. The graphic on the left shows the GFS Ensemble Forecasting System GEFS. Graphics on the right of each of the following slides is going to show you the European Ensemble Prediction System. So you see the agreement is fairly good. This goes out to 174 hours through next Wednesday, and you notice the position, the main features, the main upper level features that are really influencing the pattern from Alaska all the way to the east coast of the United States. We have an upper level ridge located over the North Pacific. We have that downstream trough that's positively tilted into California, the western United States, stretching from southern Canada down to California. And we have a strong upper level ridge continuing over parts of the Northwest Atlantic, west of Greenland, and then this subtropical ridge. It's right here on the GEFS, and on the European ensemble, it's very similar positioning. What's this going to do? You're going to get a strong upper level ridge. This ridge is going to build. If this trough deepens, the ridge is going to build because what goes down must come up. All right. So look at these features. They're locked in fairly consistently. Look at 30 December 2021 ensembles. The GEFS on the left here, again the European EPS on the right, showing again a trough over the western United States, the ridging upstream of that over the North Pacific, another strong upper level ridge, that same upper level ridge on the Atlantic side, North Atlantic side, and then we have the subtropical ridge. A very fine line, and I'll show you temperature anomalies here in this video as well. You're going to see a very strongly marked line over the central U.S. between very cold temperatures and well above normal temperatures. And again, the European EPS is very similar to the GFS Ensemble forecasting system here, with that ridging, the placement of the ridging, as well as the placement of the trough over the western U.S. We have a negative Pacific North American pattern, or PNA, and then we have this upper level ridge, the subtropical ridge. If you like winter in the east, this is like public enemy number one for you. I've seen these ridges in past winter seasons just camp out off the southeast coast and just remain strong for extended periods of time. So we'll have to wait to see how things turn out. Looking at New Year's Eve, you got any plans for New Year's Eve? Looking dry and mild with the ridge again from the Gulf of Mexico extending northward towards the mid-Atlantic. The trough and the unsettled and coldest temperatures remaining over the western U.S., and then this ridge again is poking its northern extent up towards the Bering Sea and western Aleutian Islands. The upper level ridge remains west of Greenland, and with time you'll notice a little bit of difference here. The European EPS actually has a ridge axis a little bit further east than the GEFS does, but in general the positioning of these features, the ridges and troughs, is very apparent. Looking at New Year's Day, the first day of the new year, same thing. We have this persistent upper level ridge over the North Pacific with a deep trough over the western U.S. And then we have the subtropical ridge, which is influencing the weather from the Gulf of Mexico, parts of Florida, northward towards the mid-Atlantic. And again, this is that marked line of where the cold and warm temperature, this is the boundary. This is where your baroclinic zone will set up. That baroclinic zone is basically the area where storms tend to develop and move along, feeding off strong temperature contrast. Now let's take a look at the GFS temperature anomalies. These are in degrees Celsius. Generally, you can see the general pattern here. This is Christmas Eve in the upper left, and in the bottom right here, we're basically moving forward, by the way, 24 hours. So, for example, upper left is Christmas Eve. Middle upper row is Christmas Day. Upper right is 26 December. Bottom left 27 December. The middle bottom 28 December. And the bottom right is 29 December. The purple and blue shadings represent the below normal temperatures at 2 meters. And the red and the pinkish color, that indicates above normal temperatures. So we start off with Christmas Eve and look at the areal extent of this above normal temperature area. Just really impressive. Texas on northward to Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, looking like a very mild Christmas Eve. We move over here to Christmas Day, and some of that warmth shifts further to the east. The Ohio River Valley on Christmas Day, you're going to be wondering, is it really December 25th? Some of these temperature anomalies are quite warm. This is where all the cold air is. See how the cold air is sitting over western Canada. By the 26th of December, this is Sunday, the day after Christmas, look where the warmth is. Texas, on the Gulf Coast, on up towards the Carolinas, and even up into parts of New England by the 26th. And then the pattern just continues. By the time we get to the 29th of December, some of the very cold air has pushed a little further east towards the Mississippi River here. But in general, the pattern remains the same. Subtropical ridge off the coast of the southeast, and you're going to have milder upper level flow, and that's going to result in above normal temperatures, generally from Texas to the mid-Atlantic. And then finally, for the GFS temp anomalies in degrees Celsius, this is the left-hand graphic here is 30 December, then you have New Year's Eve, 31 December in the middle, and this is the first day of the new year, January 1st on the right. Now notice what's happening though over time. So 30 December is here, 1 January is over here, and the purple and blue shading, that is advancing east, southeast. And so by the time we get to New Year's Day, we have much cooler air that's moving in now from the northern plains to the Midwest, trying to push its way, nose its way towards the East Coast. And look where the mildest temperatures get pushed to, shoved down to the south along the immediate Gulf Coast. And this could be a sign of a bit of a pattern change where the upper level ridge, a subtropical ridge, finally kind of gets squashed further south. If we look at the Euro temperature anomalies, now these are degrees Fahrenheit. Very similar color schemes here. The purple, the blue, and the green indicate below normal. This whiter color or lighter gray, and then these maroons and oranges indicate above normal temperatures. So you notice Christmas Eve here in the upper left, right at this point, look how mild the air is across much of the United States. Christmas Day, that mild air stretches from Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, the lower Ohio River Valley, and then this is the day after Christmas. Look at where the warmest temperatures remain pretty much consistently throughout these timestamps, all the way out to the 29th of December over here, where the warmest air is now shifted further towards the East Coast, especially the Mid-Atlantic, where temperatures could run 20 degrees Fahrenheit above normal by the time we get to the 29th of December. And then finally, we look at the temperature anomalies here. This is 30 December, 31 December, New Year's Eve, and then 1 January. And look at this warmth, folks. It's just phenomenal the way the atmosphere sometimes can just get stuck in a certain pattern. And that's exactly what we have going on when we were looking at those ensembles, the positioning of the upper level ridge in the North Pacific, the trough along the U.S. West Coast, and then that subtropical ridge pushing up occasionally, ridging northward, just resulting in very mild temperatures for late December into early January. Okay, now take a look at the Teleconnections Forecast. I've got the AO here in the upper left, the East Pacific Oscillation, EPO, in the upper right, and then we have the NAO, North Atlantic Oscillation Forecast, bottom left, and then in the bottom right here we have the European Deterministic PNA Forecast. So take a look at the European model here, the AO. Arctic Oscillation is projected to remain negative with a potential rebound towards neutral by 1 January. The EPO had dropped significantly negative, still fairly negative for today's date, pushing towards neutral and dropping back down negative. The North Atlantic Oscillation NAO, negative throughout much of the period through 1 January. And then this is the one, folks, the Pacific North American pattern, PNA pattern. Look how negative this thing is. I mean, a magnitude of -5. It drops off the chart. I can't even see it anymore here between the 26th and the 29th of December. It's like well south of -5 on a magnitude. And so that's just very indicative of that troughing over the western United States. Looking at global water temperature departures, just a reminder, we're in a La Nina. These bluer colors here indicate below normal water temperatures. You notice the below normal water remains over the Gulf of Alaska and just off the Pacific Northwest coast. And then we have above normal water over the North Central Pacific and even extending back towards the western portions of the North Pacific off of Japan, we have above normal water. There's also above normal water in the Gulf of Mexico as well as up the east coast right now of the U.S. We look at the latest temperature value, temperature departure value. Generally looking at a minus is about 0.83 degrees Celsius below normal in the Nino 3.4 region as of December 23rd. And then we look at the latest satellite image. This is matching up fairly well. I'm going to get to the Madden Julian Oscillation forecast in a moment, but I circled this area of persistent convection or upward vertical motion over the western Pacific. This is indicative of MJO being in phase 7, and see all this convection, and we've had a couple typhoons that have actually developed off this active area, these active thunderstorm clusters. We've had a couple typhoons in the last couple of weeks develop. One of them was pretty strong, became a super typhoon and made landfall through the Philippines before finally getting picked up and taken out to sea as it weakened. But just showing you again how the convection is occurring out in the western Pacific. Look at the latest Madden Julian Oscillation forecast. Look, we're in phase 7, and that matches up with our satellite image today. And this has been really interesting to watch. Now, this particular forecast is the GFS Ensemble forecasting system, and this runs out to January 5th, 2022. This green line indicates the where the forecast is going, and you'll notice it's not going out of 7. See, here's phase 7, and it's remaining within phase 7. Now, some of the ensemble members have it moving in towards phase 8, but this is a big change from my Teleconnections discussion video last week, where it appeared that the MJO, the rotation, would occur into phase 8 and then phase 1. But now we're not so certain about that. We may keep the convection out in the western Pacific and keep it in phase 7 longer. So we're stalled out through the 5th of January. You look at the CFS, this particular model showing a much different story. It shows a fairly significant magnitude and a rotation into phase 8, generally right around 1 January. It moves into phase 8 according to the CFS. So there's a difference of opinion here. Now let's turn our attention to the stratospheric polar vortex, and generally what we're expecting. In general, the blue coloring, by the way, on these graphics represents the coldest stratospheric temperatures. The yellow shading indicates the warmest stratospheric temperatures. And in general, what we're doing here is we're taking a look. I like to look at these solid white lines here, those geopotential height lines, and I like to see how they look. Now, do they look stretched out like a rubber band, like here? Or are they more circular or symmetrical? Now, if they're more symmetrical or circular, that's indicative of a stronger polar vortex. If they become more stretched out or elongated, that's indicative of a weaker polar vortex. So in general, you can see, but just take a look at these solid white lines. Generally, we're looking at a stretched out or an elongated polar vortex with each frame. This generally goes out through, we started on this was the 22nd of December, this was yesterday, and we go all the way out to 1 January over here. And generally, you can see what's going on here. What I really wanted to point out here in the top 3 images here is the coldest temperatures and the elongation of the polar vortex. It's going back towards Western Canada, and that's where the coldest air is going to go, okay? At least through the end of December. But by the time we get towards early January here, this is the 1st of January, the bottom right, you can see the stretching out. Now, it appears that the coldest air and the vortex elongates and pivots more towards eastern Canada and potentially the eastern U.S. And so this is really something to watch. See how this polar vortex changes shape or form. It looks weaker to me based on this stretched out rubber band effect, but we'll have to watch to see what happens with that. Okay, here are the final thoughts on today's special holiday video. Generally, the Pacific teleconnections are in control through the end of December. We're looking at a negative PNA. We also have a negative PDO, Pacific Decadal Oscillation. We're in MJO phase 7, and we're in a La Nina pattern, which favors a mild pattern for the eastern U.S. And that negative PNA and that water temperature anomaly distribution, as well as the MJO and La Nina, those are all working in a constructive, almost like a constructive feedback type pattern, where they're all favoring that western U.S. trough and the subtropical ridge off the southeastern coast and milder conditions in the east. Now the GFS European models are all forecasting the MJO to stall in phase 7 through early January, whereas the CFS is the outlier with the transition to phase 8. And just keep this in mind, in general, La Nina typically favors phases 6 and 7, where we see western Pacific convection or upper vertical motion. And you get sinking air motion in the equatorial eastern Pacific off the coast of South America, typically with La Nina. So if by chance this stalls in phase 7, that is going to continue to try to keep the milder temperatures in the eastern U.S. Now, overall, we're expecting a warm and dry period from Christmas through New Year's holiday for many eastern cities. It could be potentially colder. Some of the models, especially the Ensemble longer range, indicating the subtropical ridge to flatten or weaken, break down after the 1st of January, allowing for colder air to basically move from western Canada and the northern plains towards the east coast. Now, what we are expecting based on the model suites today are waves of colder air moving into the eastern U.S. between the 2nd and the 12th of January, with milder periods in between ahead of strong cold fronts. So we're going to see these quick hitting shots of colder air moving into the east, almost like chunks of cold air from western Canada and central Canada, northern plains to the east. These little chunks are going to break off. And then as high pressure moves off the coast, we'll get a return southerly flow, and we'll get milder periods in between those waves of colder air. So we're not expecting persistent cold, but at least it's some kind of cold, right? That maybe we can somewhat break that ridge down a little bit if you want winter weather in the east. We're also looking at a potentially more active weather pattern setting up in early January in the east, because what we're going to have is the baroclinic zone. That demarcation between very cold air and mild air is going to shift southeast, and that's going to allow these waves or areas of low pressure to develop along the zone where there's the greatest thermal or temperature contrast, and the upper level dynamics will be more favorable. Now, models, you may have noticed, models have been flip-flopping quite a bit over the past 5 days. They're trying, the models are trying to figure things out here. They're trying to figure out, the upper level synoptic features and how are they going to change. They're also trying to figure out which teleconnections will be the most dominant in the longer range. Will the Pacific teleconnections continue to be dominant? Will the MJO move into phase 8, the colder phase 8, colder temps in the east? Will that upper level ridge remain over the North Pacific in the same position with the downstream trough over the western U.S., right? So the models are having a tough time. If you like winter weather and you see one model run, it looks mild, you might be really bummed out. But then that next model run, it looks much colder. So the last 2 days, paying attention to the model runs, I have noticed a trend towards colder temperatures in the eastern U.S. after 1 January. Okay. The upper air pattern remains relatively unchanged, with high latitude ridges both over the North Pacific as well as west of Greenland, the Northwest Atlantic. And then another key player to watch is that stratospheric polar vortex, which is expected to be weakened with the coldest temperatures and elongation pinpointing the upper trough, pointing towards the upper trough over the western Canada and Pacific Northwest. You're looking at record-breaking cold temperatures potentially across places like Seattle and Portland due to this upper air pattern. A negative PNA, Pacific North American pattern, with the trough, and then that elongated polar vortex is going to empty into that trough. The coldest temperatures are going to drain right into the upper trough, and you could be looking at record-breaking cold across parts of the Pacific Northwest. Now, the vortex, again, looks like it remains elongated, and it's progged to rotate towards the eastern U.S., eastern Canada, and eastern U.S. in early January, which may help to allow colder air to filter in and finally the ridge breaking down off the southeast coast. But in general, these are my final thoughts on this special holiday video. Again, we look at the main players right now, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but in general, the positioning of the ridges and the troughs right now across North America is playing largely into the pattern of what kind of things we're seeing at the surface where we live with the weather. And so it's really impressive to watch the upper level ridge over the North Pacific and how stagnant it is in its location. In fact, it's not moving east. If it were to move a little bit further to the east towards the U.S. West Coast, that trough and that very cold air would finally make a move towards the east. But it's kind of like, a tale of two systems, right? You got the trough off the U.S. West Coast of the western U.S., and then you got the subtropical ridge. And it's a real battle between these two areas, right, in this location, that baroclinic zone, where the cold is trying to push southeast, but then the ridge is providing resistance and not allowing it to readily make it towards the southeast. So overall, Pacific teleconnections are really influencing the weather across the United States here in late December as we head towards the holiday. You can just see the temperature anomalies as I showed, where the warmest anomalies are, where the coldest anomalies are located there. Stark contrast, the teleconnections. We'll keep watching that. We'll keep looking at the La Nina. We'll see if this warming, a little bit of warming occurs in the Nino 3.4 region, to where maybe that La Nina weakens a little bit as we head into January. And we'll continue to watch these satellite images across the Western Pacific to see where the most active convection or upper vertical motion is occurring. In general, MJO, it's quite discouraging if you want cold in the east when the MJO is just sitting here and spinning around in phase 7 because it's fairly milder phase for the eastern U.S. And then the polar vortex, this is going to get interesting. We'll see what happens with time. Will this weaken in January, or will it regain strength after this stretching effect? And it's going to be interesting to watch. So that wraps things up today on my special holiday video. Thank you so much for subscribing to this channel. I really love to share the passion of the weather with you, and I certainly wish everybody a very Merry Christmas and the happiest of New Year's. May 2022 bring lots of great things to you and your family. All right, that wraps things up. I wish everybody a great holiday, and take care. Until next time, that is all I've got. Take care.